I can always turn to a book, and some books I'll reread again and again, and I know that I'm going to be able to deal with whatever it is. I also find poetry in times like that really helpful. Someone's been through something, maybe a loss, maybe something, and then you've got their beautiful words to help you deal with your emotion at that time.
Welcome back to The Mental Space. Now, today I am delighted to be joined by none other than Isobel Abuhoul, OBE nonetheless, who is the CEO of the Emirates Literature Festival, which is launching today, Isobel, yes?
It is. It's the first day today, and we're in one of the venues in the Habib bin Rashid Library across the creek from the Intercontinental Hotel Conference Centre, and so we can see both sides, and we've got authors here, authors there. So it is absolutely fantastic.
I mean, it's an incredible space. I mean, this is a beautiful building to be launching in and to be associated with.
It is absolutely. So I'm very fortunate. I'm on the board of directors for the library and obviously the Literary Festival and the foundation. And I think it's that coming together of cultural partnerships, which matters so much, as we expand and grow. I'm talking here the society in terms of culture in all its forms. The more that we hold hands, the more chance we have of helping everyone become part of that movement.
I mean, you've obviously had a lifelong love of books and of reading and of writing. From the mental space, I mean, we look at the increasing amount of anxiety and mental health issues in the world. In fact, there was a report yesterday from the McKinsey Health Institute that said in the GCC, they surveyed people in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Kuwait, and 2/3 of us are struggling with our mental health. 1 in 3 of us reporting issues with burnout, and that's very similar to other previous research. At the same time, we're seeing an increasing amount of research about the benefits of reading, and particularly books, to our mental health. So I really wanted to get your thoughts about how mental health can be improved by reading.
So you start back in childhood. So when a parent or a member of the family reads to a little baby, the baby is very soothed by the words, the voice, and also by touching the book and maybe the colours that they're seeing and associating words with images. Now, that should be a part of every child's growing up, regular being read to nighttime stories, because it's a very lovely way to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And you're gaining vocabulary. Now, another thing about reading, it gives you a better vocabulary. And one of the things we know about young people, teenagers, or, even those starting school, if you can't express yourself, that is a very difficult place. You can't get in words around what you're feeling. When you can express it, you can share it with someone else. It's not having a temper tantrum. You can say, I'm scared, or I'm nervous, or I don't want to go to school because. But if you don't have that vocabulary, it is a trouble for you. So I have been passionate all my life about reading, and particularly for young ones, because we know it's much easier to make a reader for life when you start early. So a child who grows up in a home that have books, that is read to on a daily basis, that is taken to the library, taken to a bookshop, given gifts of books, and that, parents are reading. So it's that kind of environment when you grow up. That child has a head start when it begins school. It will have a better vocabulary. It will have better mental health, more confidence. Now, confidence is very much tied to mental health. If you're a confident person, and you can deal with some of the knocks and blows that are thrown to you, because you think, well, I've managed before. If you're not, it's harder. You also, when you read a lot and read to, you have more empathy. Empathy is being able to feel how someone else may feel. So that, if it helps you, you recognize when people are struggling, but also you have a little bit of recognition of yourself, and you think, I need to take steps because I'm not myself. And you can see that. Reading also, another thing about reading is you will recognize yourself in books. And so you might be struggling. You might have trouble at work. You might have trouble in a relationship. You might be suffering trouble with, parents or children or whatever. And there are so many books out there where you will see fiction, you will see so many things going on, and then it has a happy ending. So that also is saying, well, there is a way out of this, and I can find my way through it.
It's funny you mentioned empathy because we are actually living in a changing dynamic in the corporate world in which, CEO used to be chief executive officer and it's make that profit no matter what. But increasingly, that definition is a chief empathy officer. And that actually the skills that our leaders need today are indeed linked to empathy and emotional intelligence. Your thoughts around that actually, books and reading can help us develop skills that we're actually going to need in the workplace.
Absolutely. So you mentioned emotional intelligence, so the wonderful book written by Daniel Goleman. So again, I read that book and I thought, actually, that makes such sense that we could be intelligent. But if we're not emotionally intelligent, we're not going to get on very well in life. And so that was the first time I sort of realized that people had different ways of them. You would call people, you would say, oh, that person's a people person.
Yeah.
Because they had that emotional intelligence to be empathetic, to understand other people, to listen, and give time. And again, another wonderful book was, or two books written by Thomas Erickson. So one is Surrounded by Idiots.
You did, yes. Yes, I've read it.
He's a psychologist, but he's done a lot of work in organizations and teams. And, it's such a fun book, but it's actually, you read it, and I was quite embarrassed because I recognized myself as one of the colours. I was thinking, that's just what I do, and I kept saying to the team, well, I'm surrounded by ideas, and then laughed, and, they're sort of quite taken aback. But it is a great thing. And then he's got another one with, I think it's called Working with Bad Bosses. Again, so he's looking at different ways of and helping us by understanding, we can then find a way of dealing with it. So I know what my drawbacks are. I mean, I've always known that, but actually it sort of brought it more into focus and making myself realize that everyone is different and you need to, in a team, you need to have different strengths.
Yeah.
So again, in the workplace, it's really, really important to let people speak their mind. And I talk about 360 discussions. So when you're having a sort of a review at work, KPIs, it should be 360 because you can, your team to say, actually, that was terrible. You did so and so, and not to get offended by it. So open conversations are really important. So when I grew up as a child, there was very much, and this was a long time ago, very much you had to respect your elders, and you didn't speak unless you were spoken to.
Yeah.
And that was
which is an ethos that remains in some boardrooms these days.
Yes.
However,
I was determined when I had children, I didn't want them to have that. I wanted them to be open and to be able to say, you were awful, or you shouldn't have said that.
Yeah.
And yes, okay, it might be upsetting, but it's better that it's said than what used to happen, when I was a child and as I grew up, because you can't change that relationship.
No.
What you set as a child is how you be. And the only thing I said was off limits. I said, you can say anything, but never, ever criticize what I put. So, but I said, because, I provide food with love, and that's something I just can't take. Just don't say anything. That's or anything. So,
well, it is important to have boundaries. I mean, but it's interesting the way you talk about, having read Surrounded by Idiots, that gave you an element of self-reflection about your own sort of behaviours.
yes.
And I know you've talked previously about books being mirrors for us.
Yes.
And that book actually gave you the ability to perhaps stare into something that you've had a conversation with yourself. If somebody else had that conversation with you, it might have been a bit more difficult.
Exactly. So book as a mirror is so important. That when I was growing up again, I go back to my childhood, books were the most important thing, informing my character in so many ways. And I was a confident child. I could read by the time I was 3. I, had no issue with failing. And that was all, I'm sure, a lot of it was because I had access to lots of books. So I loved The Secret Garden, and it was a strong, unlikable female heroine right at the beginning. But over the course of the book, she changes for the better and she becomes a heroine. I absolutely loved Heidi. Again, these are books that I read that stay with me even to today. They were female, they were young, they, they had difficulties. The heroine in Secret Garden was orphaned, and she had to travel by sea to live with an uncle who she never
Yeah.
met. Yorkshire, dark Yorkshire moors coming from India, from the heat and the warmth. And so, they got through an awful lot, and yet they managed. They managed. They came out stronger and better. And I think, access to books like that for children. So if you only ever read about male heroines or male heroes,
Yeah.
I say, that's a slip.
As a father of a 7-year-old girl, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really important. And again, I think my parents were very accepting. They didn't set us goals, you have to be a doctor, you have to be this. They just loved us for what we were. They did have strict things about manners, that, all is bad. But that was the boundaries they put. But there were no boundaries about, you can't do anything you want because you're a female. And again, I think that was important. That there shouldn't be this restriction on whatever you do in life. You should be able to aim for the stars as a child, and no one should be able to tell you you can't do that.
I mean, if I throw back to my childhood, I actually grew up with very low self-esteem. I've had imposter syndrome all my life, and I'm beginning to ask those questions now and go on that journey. It's when you never believe that you were enough, and you never believe that you were good enough, particularly in a kind of professional setting. When I was a kid, I was bullied at school, and my books were my escape, and they really, really helped me. We've got children growing up in a very polarized world, very noisy world, can sometimes be a very toxic world, particularly with social media. How important is for parents to realize that these books can help children and support children by giving them, another world in which to escape?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's really, really important. And I think choice of books is really important. So you can't just buy 3 books and say you read those. That's enough. You need to understand. And I've got now 8 grandchildren and 5 children. And, each of them has a different taste in the kind of books that they enjoy, the books that they gravitate towards. And you've got to give them that choice. So that means, going to the library, going to the bookshop, and letting them have an opportunity to say, I like that book. And often children and adults need choose books by the cover.
Yeah.
And that's fine, because they'll soon learn to develop a taste in the kind of books they like. They'll soon not just look at the cover, they'll open it and have a look inside. That's important parts of becoming familiar with books. Now, imagine you're a little child. Okay, and you grow up in a house without books. No one's ever read to you because no one thought it mattered. You've been loved and cared for and well fed, but books were never part of your life. You arrive at school at 4 or 5, you have to see a book. You don't have a lot of vocabulary just because you don't have access. You might not know elephants and dinosaurs and the names of, umpteen dinosaurs as children do nowadays. And then you're given, you start with a book, learning things like that. And it's learning to read is boring. I mean, I'm saying it's boring. It's a chore. It's not enjoyable. You've got to decipher these black marks on a page and then put them together and work out what the word is. I mean, you're not reading a story. It's not enjoyable. And yes, they have readers and things like that. But those children who start with that enormous advantage of having been involved with books from the very earliest stage have a huge advantage. So they also find, it tedious learning to read if they've not already done so. And but they have an incentive to get beyond that because they know that books are good.
Yeah. Yeah. If we stay with the parents and with the adults for a moment, again, the benefits as an adult of reading, particularly in this fast-paced, always-on digital world that we now live in. What's your experience of what books can do for our mental health?
Right. So they help you relax. They help you escape. And we all need to escape. We all need to escape to a desert island. Desert island disc. You're going to take.
Yeah.
And I turn to books for escape a lot of the time. I turn to books when I'm fascinated by. So fiction is where I go for escape generally. But I love nonfiction, the kind of books that are helping me understand something better. So, wellness, sort of all sorts of wellness. Why, I look at some psychology of children and things like that. How can we handle not, children who are nervous, who have anxieties, who have phobias, for whatever reason. And there are books that can help you as a parent, but also there are books for children as well on all sorts of issues that it certainly wasn't before. So
Yeah.
you can find books on jealousy, on bullying, on all these things. And it does help children when you read those because they're very subtle. They're not sort of in your face kind of books. They're really, really subtle. And I think children then can sort of really take time to think about it and understand that there are ways of coping with it. And it's really important. I also think discussing books at home and discussing books that, you might be sharing a chapter book with one of your children and then sort of saying, what did you think about that character? Or if they're into the Harry Potter series.
Just finish them.
Yes. It's also to see to read the books long before you see the film.
Yeah.
If it's possible. I mean, it was for two of my children. They were at the very beginning of the Harry Potter era, and it was just amazing, the excitement and the fact that they just couldn't stop reading it.
Yeah.
It's just lovely to see. As adults, when we read a book, it could be 400, it could be 800 pages long, it's a very different experience for our brain than it is on the time that we waste on social media, and I'm not really overly into social media, but Instagram is quite interesting. I had different types of music, from Africa to India. And if you watch one, then you suddenly get a whole slurry of other ones. And then half an hour later, all you've done is skip through this thing. And time's gone. And with books, it's a slow process. The way that we take a book in, but it's a physical book, it's very different to reading on the screen.
Yeah.
It's the same with Kindle. I've got a Kindle, I like it, but it wouldn't be for a book that I'd really want to read seriously. So I think it's, as human beings, I'm sure we're going to adapt to the digital age. I really worry about children and the addictive nature and of the endorphins that the quick fix, as it were, from social media, that it is really setting them up that they then do have withdrawal symptoms.
Absolutely. I mean, you kind of said something this morning, which really gelled with me. And look, we've got the Emirates Literature Festival. We've got so many different voices, so many different thinkers, so many different thoughts in English and in Arabic. And if we stay with social media, all we ever get fed these days are the things that we think we know. So we're spoon-fed more of what we think. Our thoughts are never challenged. We are just given more of what we think we know. So with this digital age, with this polarization, with these filter bubbles where we never get exposed to new ideas, how important is it for us to have things like the Emirates Literature Festival, where you're exposed to new ideas? And as you say, when you read a book, you're on that path with that thinker. So you are going to get challenged, which actually we need a bit more of, really.
Yes. What I've always said about the festival is it is a safe place where you can agree to disagree and respect. That's the whole point. That you come in and, the author might be saying this and etc. And then someone in the audience might say, why did it end like that? And the author might give an answer, why it was ended. And you might disagree with it. That's fine. Put your hand up and say, no, it's perfect. I really like the ending. Or whatever you discuss.
Yeah.
The conversations I have heard and the disagreements that I have heard have sometimes been the highlight for me of the session, because it shows you a different sort of viewpoint, and we need to be challenged.
Yeah.
Because, when I was at school, we used to debate.
Yes.
And so you would have to, one of you would have to argue for, one of you would argue against, and the next week you'd swap. So you've got to be able to formulate your ideas in a cohesive way, and we can't attack someone. It's never about the person. It's about what they're saying. It's an opinion that you have and that they have. and it is a really important skill as well. Reading helps you develop those skills, and it also gives you the vocabulary and whether you're writing it, whether you're making notes, and so on. And passing exams is important. If you are not a reader, you're going to struggle more. And it's, why? Why, when you could actually not struggle? Why put yourself in a thing, that I never had a single worry about exams. It didn't mean I did well anymore. I just thought I'd give it my best shot. Yeah.
Have there been challenging times in your life where books have personally helped you get through?
Yes, absolutely. And I turn times like that. I turn to poetry. I mean, I've had, as everyone, I've had lots of personal tragedies. I've had lots of challenges across my life, but I thank God that my late beloved parents gave me such a sort of a strength in the way that books were such an important part of my life. So I can always turn to a book, and some books I'll reread again and again, and I know that I'm going to be able to deal with whatever it is. I also find poetry in times like that really helpful. But it's going to be something where someone's been through something, maybe a loss, maybe something, and then you've got their beautiful words to help you deal with your emotion at that time.
I'm going to ask you the question that I bet you're going to get asked about 1,000 times this coming week and this coming month. What are you reading right now?
I'm reading Aid by Professor Rosa Kenny because she's a gerontologist.
Yeah.
Her 40 years of research, she's got this wonderful book called Age Group that shows that probably 65% of aging is in our own hands. The other bit is genetic. But we can live better, longer, in sound body and mind if we adopt habits just like nothing, making you better. There are some things that those habits actually can help, and laughter is something that I think is so underrated that we all need to laugh every day.
Absolutely. That feels like a mic drop moment. So Isobel Abuhoul, CEO of the Emirates Literature Festival, thank you so much for joining us on the Mental Space today. It's been a pleasure talking.